Hi, Liz. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Next in Line podcast. We're so excited to have you on as a guest. Now, before we get into everything that we're going to talk about, I want you to introduce yourself to the audience. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what got you to where you're at today.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Karina, for having me. And I love being a part of this discussion. Anytime I can give some words of wisdom to anybody who's trying to figure out their career or, even give them some cautionary tales through my experience, I'm happy to do so. It's hard to put all of my experience down into a couple of key, paragraphs, but I'll just start with when I think about my career, I didn't really, go down the path of some grand master plan. I originally wanted to be in broadcasting and in journalism because Katie Couric was big, when I was, back then when I was going through school and trying to figure out what I wanted to be. But those jobs were few and far between, and I wasn't sure exactly where I was going to go. But I loved the idea of being a part of people's stories, right? And listening to people and truly understanding, what's going on in people's lives that would be so different than the world that I had ever experienced.
Yeah.
And so when I started my career, I was lucky to actually start at Kodak. And Kodak at the time was the biggest brand in the world, and it was at the forefront of telling people stories.
Yes.
I have to say that my now 18-year-old son, when I was telling him my story of my career and told him about Kodak, he was like, "Who's Kodak again?" And that is actually, part of how I think about where my career has grown and evolved over time is that I learned early on that you had to adapt to change and you had to think about even the biggest brand in the world that everybody knew can actually go into being not relevant and not, losing its market share and not adapting to change. And that has really helped drive my choices from there. And then I went to a company that was very much on the forefront of telling other human stories and being part of people's lives, which is Discovery and Discovery Communications. And it was back when there was reality TV and then there was documentaries. And
Yes.
Discovery really kind of brought that together. But it was, a great chance to be a part of something unique and new that brought people together. And then from there, I went to a couple of different other roles, including working at an agency at Ogilvy and Mather, as well as working at Kimberly Clark. But really, from there, I went to IHG Hotels and Resorts for about a decade, and that was being able to think about travel and how travel can really transform the way you look at the world, learning
Absolutely.
about other cultures and learning about how other people grew up and lived and again all of those pieces of understanding human connections throughout my career kind of just built on top of each other. And now I'm at a company, Hornblower, and Hornblower is a marine and land-based experience company, and they are really at the forefront of land and marine-based connections. And what we do every day is we move people both literally and emotionally, right?
Yes.
And it's just been an incredible journey when I think about my early days at Kodak all the way through all of those brands I mentioned to where I am today. But the one thing that has always guided me is just, leaning into where I knew my passion was and connecting to the world around me. And, I'm very lucky to have been on this journey and where I am.
Well, thank you so much for sharing what a wonderful journey you've had throughout your career. I mean, I love hearing the story from starting all the way at Kodak to now where you're at today. It's truly inspiring. And we talked about your definition of success and how that's evolved through the career journey and every place that you've been at. And, especially in those moments that maybe there's a little bit of uncertainty. So, how do you personally define success today? And how has that definition shifted over time for you now that you've evolved into the leader that you are?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that I reflect on quite a bit at different stages of my career. I'll start with success has to be something that you define yourself. It can't be defined out there. It can't
Yeah.
be defined by measuring yourself against somebody else that you think is smarter, better, more equipped than you are, or have a different education or different background. Success starts with how you define it for yourself. And as I look at my life trajectory as well as my career, I've defined it differently at every stage because I have changed at every stage of my career. Before I was married, when I was married, when I had a child. Now I hate to say it, I'm an empty nester, which I can't even get those words out of my mouth. But you know, on the personal level, you have to balance being a new mom, or you have to balance being able to have work-life balance and, all of those things, and making sure your personal life is just as much a goal for you and success as your professional one. And for now, I mean, the way I define success at this point in my career, it is very much of how am I impacting the team that I now have the responsibility of leading, the company in which I'm trying to drive performance, and making sure that I am, I look at it as if it were my own company. How would I make sure that this organization is set up for success?
Yeah.
And and then personally, it's being able to take every day and say that I was able to impact one person's life in a positive way, and if I could do that and go to sleep every night, knowing that I did that, then that to me feels like I've achieved something meaningful.
Absolutely. And I love that. And I feel like it also relates back to the industry that, we're both in terms of marketing. And I think that when you're making an impact to, let's say, for the business or to the audience that you're trying to connect with, that is the ultimate goal with it. And if you're able to do that because you're passionate about what you do and impact the people, like going on this podcast and giving us advice for the next gen, and or whether that's, giving someone some advice on your team, like there's so many little things that could really change the trajectory of, a lot of people's career and things like that just from listening to everything that you're saying so far.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Well, I have to say that I can't even take credit for all of this too. I've learned from other women and other leaders that kind of brought me along in my career as well, and they have been such a critical part that has shaped and forged my ability to lean in when I
Yes.
don't feel comfortable leaning in, or that I'm scared, as well as making sure that they were very much giving me thoughtful feedback, right? Not just the "attaboys, you did great," even when I know I didn't,
Yeah.
or the too harsh, where it was like, "I'm never going to do that again because everybody thinks I'm not
Yeah.
equipped to do it." But I will say find those people too that you can surround yourself with, that kind of guide you on your path of your career.
Absolutely. And I agree with that. And you mentioned something there that I want to double down on, and it's about fear, honestly. And I think that you've mentioned that, staying curious helps remove the fear from change and the change that you may face throughout your career, whether it's, a different role or a different industry or whatever it could be, right? So what does that look like in practice for you? And how has that curiosity guided you through major transitions in your career or even industry?
Yeah, well, you can use my cautionary tale at Kodak is that when you don't, um, really understand and recognize that if you're fearful of doing something, that you're not going to adapt to change, and you're not going to, lean into the moments where you're going to grow the most.
Yeah.
And I think about, for me, I always approach everything with a growth mindset. Take this year with AI, and everything that has changed,
Yes.
and just even technology in general. I may not know it now as much as somebody else may, but if I say I don't know it yet, then I have to figure out, like, how can I learn it? Like, I'm never going to be in coding, so I'm not going to go into like trying to figure out how, deep I need to be as far as a subject matter expert within technology. But I need to know how to adapt to it. I need to know how it's changing the world. I need to think about
Yes.
how I can use it to make me better, smarter, more productive, and be able to, create something that, again, goes back to my purpose, right? Which is giving back to the world. And so for me, I have to stay curious. I mean, marketing in and of itself is in the business of creatively solving problems.
Yes.
And, everything that comes in that you're fearful of is you just trying to also try to figure out how to solve that problem.
Absolutely. I love the way you put it. Creatively solve problems. I've never heard that before. I love that. I'm taking a mental note as we speak. And now that we're talking about AI and the change of technology, it's going to constantly adapt. I mean, constantly evolve, like you're saying, right? So I know that we see AI is changing the way marketing leaders think. How do you see it when it comes to either creating the content or communicating? Like, what's your advice on using it responsibly instead of really relying on it? Um, because there needs to be a balance, I feel.
Oh, 100%. And that's part of, when you think about AI, it is the tool to help you be more productive, more focused,
Yeah.
more relevant and contextual, and create opportunities that maybe you haven't gotten there yet, but it can't take away some of the core principles of, the way that we think, the way that we feel as humans, the way that, marketing, and something I inherently believe is critical to every great marketer, is tapping into emotions, and in a way that drives people, whether it drives people to purchase or drives people to act, or, it helps you really understand keep your finger on the pulse of humanity. But AI can help you get there faster. Maybe it used to take you, um, you know, a couple days to write a presentation. Now it can take you a couple hours,
Yeah.
or when you're presenting to an audience, you would have to think about, like, how do I tailor this for this particular audience? And most of the time you're still thinking about it in your mindset of, how do I get my message to this person, and how do they understand what I'm trying to say, versus I even think about what I do with AI right now. Give you an example with my CFO. I'm like, how is my CFO going to think about this? Because he's going to think about it very numbers, analytics, and, at the bottom line. And I'm thinking marketing and
Yes.
brand and, yes, performance. But how do I translate that into CFO speak? And
Yes.
that's where I can take, a really complex thing like brand building versus performance marketing, and say, help me translate this in a way that will resonate with the CFO, versus how do I then create and tailor that for a board meeting, and then to my employees that are working on social media, that have just joined the workforce. Like, those are
Yeah.
very vast, different, people that take information differently, and AI can help me just tailor that and focus it. But it's still my thoughts. It's still
Absolutely.
my message. I just can make sure that it resonates with the person I'm giving it to.
Yeah, and I think that's the advantage with this tool that we have now. I think it, like you mentioned a little bit earlier, it lets you do it a lot faster and you're able to tailor to these audiences um, at a quicker speed. And also, I would say um, the different audiences too that are being receptive to what you're trying to change with the AI, it's going to be a lot better than you just sitting there for hours and trying to do it alone, or, getting advice from X person and having to bring them in. Like, it could really change the way you do a lot of things. But I agree with you on that part. It's definitely, I would say, a thought partner rather than just a tool that you should rely on like solely by itself.
Agree, agree.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great way to even take a very complex message and, like, try to synthesize it, because we
Yes.
as humans have a lot of, complexity in the way that we think and, again, see the world, and, like, can you help, tailor this into a really succinct message?
Absolutely. And to that point too, that goes back to being curious and the learning, because you're able to leverage this tool to learn and kind of bounce, either questions you may have and you're like, "Hey, what about this?" Like, you could start asking the tool that you're using and continuously learn that way as well. If let's say someone in the next gen doesn't have access to like a mentor like that, or, they don't have access to someone they can lean on to ask those questions. I feel like it's another way to learn as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And speaking about all this AI talk, I kind of want to transition back to how you were talking about failure and how that has shaped also a big portion of your career as well. And
Yeah,
I remember I quoted you here because I was like, this stuck with me in our prep session. And it's when you said, if you're not failing, you're not trying. Can you share a moment in your career when things didn't go as planned, or you learned about leadership, risk, and recovery from that experience? Tell us a little example if you're open to sharing.
sure, and, well, by the way, I fail all the time, and even now, and this is again about growth, right? And it is very much you have to invest in taking risks and doing things that you're scared to do, you're not sure of, but you have to just make sure that you are um, understanding that failure is part of what and who you're supposed to be. I could use many examples, from last week to, 20 years ago, but one that probably sticks, in top of mind for me. And I'm not going to give the exact example, but I'll give you kind of like the framework.
Yes.
Was when I was, putting together a sweepstakes, or earlier in my career, and for anybody who's ever worked on a sweepstakes, you have to go through and make sure, you're set up legally, you're mitigating risks, and you're trying to navigate all the reasons why, things could go awry when you're doing sweepstakes. And I went into one that actually was a very successful one to break through, to get people excited and engaged. It became one of the biggest campaigns that we ended up having during that time period.
Yeah.
And it went viral in a good way.
Wow.
The problem was we had some very smart gamers who figured out how to, work through the back end system where you could actually snail mail an entry into the sweepstakes publish or fulfillment house. And the massive amount of mail and people who are trying to gamify this, it actually cost us more than we anticipated in our marketing budget. And then the sweepstakes fulfillment house wasn't able to work through like answering all of those, and then people were complaining, and it was like it just went from having a great moment to probably the one of the worst, and it went all the way up to the CEO. And by the way, at that time I was like, the CEO didn't know who I was. But he soon found out, because as soon as they figured out where this stemmed from, I started texting with my CEO, and I was like, oh my God, I am totally going to get fired. This is going to be the worst part. Like, my career is over.
Yeah.
And I realized at that moment that it was more about what I did about it. I was like, all right, I got to figure this out. Um, I I got us into this. I'm going to, even if they fire me, I'm going to fix it. I need to fix this. And I worked through it. I gave the CEO confidence that things were being handled. We did daily stand-ups, and I made sure that I was the throat to choke at the end of the day. I was the one that needed to ensure that everything was resolved. All of that said, and to make a long story short, I failed, and the CEO knew my name and actually appreciated the fact that he could rely on me when he knew that there was, you know, my word was that I am going to be in it, and I am going to make sure that this is a lesson learned that will make me a better marketer moving forward. Now,
That's
if you had looked at that story, you would say, "Oh my gosh, I would never do that." I will guarantee you I know more about sweepstakes than most people because of that. And if I had not gone through that experience, I would have never gotten to the point where I built a relationship and I learned so much, not only about the fulfillment and the sweepstakes, aspect of it, but about myself. I learned
yes.
about myself.
Absolutely. And I feel like this story that you just shared with us also shows that when you take accountability to, let's say, something that you're failing at, it could even turn out for the better because you built such a great relationship with that CEO at the time. And, he knew you and ended up knowing you for fixing it and, putting your all in it to make it right. Right. So I think that goes a long way when you realize the failure and you hone into it, not run away
Yeah,
from it, if that makes sense.
exactly. It's all about what we do with the failure, and we can
Yes.
either lean into it or we can run away and hide. And I think when you lean into it, it takes you where you're supposed to be.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you. And now kind of shifting towards your current position and the current industry and company that you're at, Hornblower Group, know that they've been known for designing memorable and people first moments, as we talked a lot about the experiences that you guys have. And I wanted to know, how did you think marketing is shifting towards, this experience driven storytelling, wave, if you want to say, and what does attainable luxury mean to you when it comes to this space?
Yeah, it's great questions. And let's first start saying it like it's evolving. Everything is evolving as you think about experiences and how you define luxury. But just starting with Hornblower and City Cruises, which is a brand that is, think of it as hospitality on the water, right? Marine hospitality, but it's dining, sightseeing, charter cruises, and now live experiences. We're going through, the opportunity to make sure that we're providing great moments that deserve a better view, right? You take that concert, you take that birthday celebration, you take those events, even with teams, and you yeah, add that to an incredible view of the city, and you create this memory that you can put into your memory bank, right? It's like a return on experiences, outside of a return on investment, that you can say it checks so many boxes, and it made me have this moment to just appreciate all of the celebrations, as well as how we're creating something that's unique and bespoke and differentiated, that you never even thought about or expected before when you would think about a dining cruise. It's not your grandma's dining cruise. It is absolutely something that leverages the opportunity to have that moment in your life that you take away and you're like, I can't wait to go back. Um,
Yes.
and for us, when you think about even attainable luxury, luxury doesn't have to be some thing that you wear on your wrist, or it's just for those that have massive amount of discretionary income. Luxury is something that you know fills you back into you know you save for it, and it's becomes, an opportunity for you to, have an experience that is more important that you take with you in those life moments, and that you could pass down to other people. It's like, I had this experience, and for me, that's something more meaningful than a thing. We used to have the analogy even at IHG for travel, but also I say it's very transferable here, is like the best gifts can't be wrapped, right?
Yes, absolutely
It's
right.
something emotional and meaningful that you can't even you can barely articulate, but it's there, and experiences provide that for you.
Yeah, and I feel like when you're talking about the experience and the moment that you're creating for people who do these experience for with you guys and just in general, like I feel like those experience end up becoming like a core memory for a lot of people. Like
Absolutely.
especially what with what you're offering and what you're trying to do in your industry as well. Like that could be like a core memory that gets passed down like generations on generations just because of one experience that someone had. And if you're able to do that, even from like a marketing perspective and really connect with someone like that, I feel like that's so, like you're saying, it's very fulfilling. It fills someone's cup if
It
everyone
does.
put it like that.
That's a great way to put it. It fills your cup.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that. And now I kind of want to transition to a little bit um, to the next generation and talking about some of the hardest stories that maybe are a little bit difficult to rewrite, as you have told me before. And how have you learned to reframe self doubt and lead with confidence, especially in spaces where you might be the only woman at the table? I know this
Mhm.
is something that maybe the next gen is not used to hearing. So I wanted to see if we could talk a little bit about that today.
Yeah, yeah, and, when I think about when I started my career, there weren't as many, women, in leadership roles, and when you get into certain industry, whether it's the hospitality, hotel industry, or even in, marine, hospitality, it's like you didn't see a lot of women holding and in roles that were traditionally by their male counterparts,
Yeah.
whether it's finance or operations, et cetera. And I will say that, with me, I there's been so many moments that I've shown up in roles that I didn't feel like I was ready for, right? Maybe I was the only woman at the table, or maybe I felt inferior for one reason or another, and I had to just remind myself that I belonged there and I was there for a reason. And self-doubt, can be something that is actually your worst enemy. But if you actually remind yourself that you have something that nobody else does, you have a superpower that nobody else, sitting in that table does, will have, and that you can actually make people better and help educate them in areas that they hadn't thought of, whether it's creative problem solving, whether it's understanding a customer, understanding a guest experience,
Mhm.
or you're great in one area or another, and you lean into that and you continue to grow your knowledge base. It's like, show up, and even when you don't feel ready, lean into it, because you're never going to be ready, right? You're
Absolutely.
never going to feel 100% confident, and that's part of, you know again, this imposter syndrome probably women have more than their male counterparts. Is like, I'm going to show up and I'm like, people are going to find out that I really don't, I'm not sure I know what I'm talking about. But then you remind yourself, oh yes, you do. Um,
Absolutely.
I was going to say one thing that actually, my husband taught me this, or told me this early in my career, and it's something that I've taken with me throughout every one of those moments, which is, there are going to be many people who doubt you in your life, but you should never be one of them. And I was like, wow, that was okay. Yeah. I
That
have
you
to reframe my mindset every time I show up. And even when
absolutely.
that little voice sneaks in, shut it down.
Yes, I couldn't agree more with you. I feel like it's hard when you're in that moment and you're feeling that way and you're in your own head and you're like, wait, should I be here? And it's like you mentioned, it's reframing the mindset so that you show up with the confidence and you know that you're, like you said earlier, you're there for a reason. You're there because of your knowledge, your unique perspective that you bring, you know, everything that you've done up until that moment, you're there for a reason. That's something that I actually it's funny that you mentioned that. I stand by that. I stand by the typical phrase that you hear, everything happens for a reason, and translating that to, my career in the workforce, now it's like, okay, I'm here for a reason. Now let's kind of lean into that like you're saying. So I I do agree with that 100%. And that's something that I've been taking on throughout I'm still early in my career. So like I'm still, taking that day by day.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say you are doing a fantastic job in your career, and I know that everybody can learn from you as much as they can learn from me, and that's the other piece I would say is, like, you can learn from everybody that you meet, regardless of where they
Absolutely.
are in their career, because everybody has something, to teach you, and I think that's the other thing. It's like, never dismiss somebody, whether they are straight out of college or whether they're sitting in the CEO chair. I
Yes,
obviously you wouldn't do the latter, but it is that moment too of like you can learn and create that knowledge phase too by just listening.
for sure. And I feel like that's just like in this new era that we're in. It should be normalized that you're right. We all learn from each other no matter, at what level you're at. I think like I mentioned before, like everyone brings a unique perspective and there's
Absolutely.
always something to learn from someone. Like I just by this conversation alone, I've learned so much from you so far and, I take that with me as the days go on. Like I won't forget it.
That means a lot, and, again, that's where if I can help anybody else who is going through the same, you know, uh, thoughts and process and, career doubt, it's that we'll all figure it out. It
Yes,
does happen for a reason, and all of those moments lead you to where you're supposed to be.
absolutely. And as we wrap up the podcast, there's one more question that I always love to ask. And it's for anyone who's listening and navigating maybe constant change or maybe feels stuck in their own story. What advice would you give them about staying adaptable and refining success on their own terms?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think that that's where, again, the best stories are the stories we tell ourselves, and when you constantly are, making sure that you're staying top of mind and future proofing whatever is happening next. Again, think about Kodak and the biggest brand in the world was a part of everybody in everyday life. And if you're not thinking about what's next, leaning into being uncomfortable and keeping your eye on the future, then you're going to be left behind. But if you're doing all of those things and you're constantly staying curious. Just be curious, ask questions, be vulnerable, and recognize you don't have to know everything. And if you do know everything, you're lying to yourself and to others. It's
Yes.
like, acknowledge I don't understand that, but learn it and seek
Yeah.
to learn it, and that just helps you continue to reflect on the world around you and be prepared to be unprepared, no matter what life brings you.
I absolutely love that, and I couldn't have thought of a better way or you honestly ended this the perfect way because that was a mic drop moment in my book, and you know what? I'm gonna leave it off there because that I feel like a lot of people are gonna take a lot of wisdom from this podcast, and, I appreciate you coming on and joining us on the show, and I just thank you for everything that you shared today.
Well, thank you, Karina. It's been a pleasure to get to know you and to be a part of this podcast, and I can't wait to see who the next guest you have on. And it's just you're doing such a great job of impacting people's lives. And I was very honored and to be asked to be a part of this. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate that.